Ieyasu. 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 Ieyasu.
So that's the holidays done anyway. There's normally one more treat at the end of it all. The annual message from Square Enix's president. Normally something absolutely horrific and a lovely excuse to shit all over a video game executive. But he's not done one this year. Fucking lazy bastard.
What am I supposed to do now?
Fortunately, however, we don't really need an excuse to shit on video game executives. In fact, I thought it would be quite cathartic to just slag them off. I mean, it's not much different from when we normally talk about video game executives, but this time I really went out of my way to be a twat to a bunch of twats. One of the things that has consistently aggravated me about the way game publishers conduct themselves is how they absolutely definitively won't take responsibility for a damn thing. Their executives take credit and enormous bonuses when things do well, and pass the buck when things don't go well, while continuing to take enormous bonuses. It's something I've complained about as asides in many videos, but I've never fully dedicated a subject to it. And without a terrible Square Enix president's statement to shit on this year, I might as well aim the industrial anus cannon at the entire lot of the bastards. It's an important topic to keep in mind, as the subtle and insidious ways in which any corporation attempts to avoid a shred of accountability is really quite disgusting. After all, the mainstream game industry is supposed to be led by the executives at these companies. The publishers have their hands on the purse strings, they decide which games get made, how they're funded, how they're made, how they're marketed, packaged and sold. Yet, when an executive talks about problems within the industry, it behaves as if said industry is an independent entity, something that behaves on its own, and publishers can only respond to it. They will blame the market for their scummy business practices and failures to meet the obscene financial expectations of shareholders, which really is an amazingly ballsy ploy, because surely they are the market. They're also a bunch of pig-ignorant, shit-headed, helmet-brained, avaricious fucking twat-hammers. It's not even my opinion that game executives, all of them, are pig-ignorant, shit-headed, helmet-brained, avaricious fucking twat-hammers. It's an objective fact that was proven by some scientists in a lab. Seriously? I saw it happen. And one of the scientists was holding a test tube when it happened, which proves I saw it. I thought about all this after stumbling on an article from last summer and getting mad about it. It was attached to a more recent story about how Warner Brothers used content from Charlie the Unicorn without the creator's permission. You know, because companies love to police the internet for so-called copyright infringement, but don't mind infringing on the copyright of anything they see on the internet. And even when called out, they'll just quietly delete it, without offering so much as an apology. But heaven forbid if you use 30 seconds of a movie trailer, bunch of The earlier story was really just a standard and humdrum one about yet another publisher putting as many eggs as possible into the mobile freemium basket. But when I saw that Warner Brothers claimed to be stepping away from AAA because of what it calls a volatile market, I just felt particularly bloody insulted this time. Really though, how could one not feel insulted when Warner Brothers' gaming boss JB Perrette is taking a soft wet dump on our intelligence. This is what Perret did when he said the company was doubling down on mobile freemium games to make more money than it needs, while pretending that decisions such as that aren't the exact fucking problem. Like, are you fucking kidding? JB Perret. Your company's response to market volatility is to cram itself into an already crowded market to get richer quicker, even though that kind of bandwagon jumping creates market saturation, which makes it harder for games to succeed, which causes the market bloody volatility you're claiming to want to get away from. And then you have the nerve, the areola flicking temerity to blame the market TM, as if you're not a huge part of it. Are you fucking stupid? Are you actually fucking stupid, you stupid fuck? The answer to that question, by the way, is that in this particular instance, the stupidity is feigned obfuscation, but in a more general sense, yes. The answer is yes, because, you know, video game executive. Perret said there's a lot more growth opportunity in the mobile space, which is another huge contributing factor to the fragility of the industry. We've talked about this in many videos, but to briefly refresh. This is the lie of infinite growth that fuels the insatiable greed of game executives and their investors. Companies are expected to always make more money this year than they did the year before, and to do that forever. Simply making billions of dollars isn't enough. It's never enough. Companies keep having to grow. Reality be damned. It's an unhinged way to run a business when you truly think about it, fueled by an unhinged level of greed. How can the market not be volatile when the driving motive of the morons in charge is actual fucking madness? That's what it is when your goals so blatantly fly in the face of reality itself, and yet you persist, while doing long-term damage that could have been easily avoided if your intentions were even halfway towards reasonable. Yet, when those morons talk about the problems their dumbass behaviour is literally causing, oh, I don't know, a wizard done it. The game industry right now is in a terrifying freefall. The enshittification of products and services is out of control, with many of those services so ill-advised and subsequently unsuccessful that they get shut down less than a year after launch.
You're still mad at me?
Game budgets are out of control. Those that get made routinely fail to meet their staggeringly high sales expectations. Developers are pretty fucking scared right now because there's just no career security, and it's all the fault of the dumbasses who are supposed to be running the games business but are just running it into a diaper-filled ditch. Layoffs are at crisis levels as thousands and thousands of jobs have been taken away by so-called job creators. Note that I didn't say the word lost just then. The jobs haven't been lost. The employees knew exactly where their jobs were, and we know where they are now because they were revoked, seized, taken away by publishers that wanted to save money after using the jettisoned employees to rake in billions of dollars.
Hang on, when an in-charge type says that a job's been lost, doesn't that just beg the question who was supposed to be keeping track of it?
Oh, you're right. That's a good point. The passive voice can absolutely piss off when it comes to this subject. What's happening in the business right now, all of it is an active choice, or the results of active choices that are so predictable they're indistinguishable from choices in and of themselves. It's like when a health insurance executive enacts company policy knowing that policy will kill thousands of people. We can use the passive voice to create degrees of separation, or we could call it murder like it is. Everybody needs to remember that what these companies do are actions that have been chosen. If I have to take responsibility for that cake I picked up and fucked last August, then the management at Microsoft, Activision Blizzard, Warner Brothers, etc. need to take responsibility for the thousands of individuals and families they've put at financial risk. And I really am sorry about the cake, even if the volatility of the bakery forced my pants down. The passive voice is exactly how executives are trying to wheedle their way out of things. And sadly, it works. Almost nobody in the gaming press calls these fuckers out when they talk about the industry as if things happen by magic. I've complained in previous work about the way job revocation is talked about in the media, how it's often said that companies are hit by layoffs, affected by them, almost as if the bloody company is the victim. They're not affected by layoffs, they're putting the layoffs into effect. Or, as I like to say, companies are indulging in layoffs. It's all just part of the lie of infinite growth after all, a method by which companies cut costs to make investors think they're making more money than they did last year. Like every other lie or piece of propaganda their representatives spout, publishers have gone unchallenged on their bullshit for decades, and the result is that we just take it for granted as a law of nature that the market is tumultuous, that budgets are bloated, that excessive monetization is a necessity, that job security is non-existent because that's just the reality of business. It's fucking not. Business isn't a force of nature or an act of God or a sentient anomaly beyond our control. It's a product of calculated design, impacted by the bad decisions and short-sighted goals of the dipshits who are very much in charge until it's convenient to claim they aren't. Like, folks accept uncritically that games are too expensive to make without asking why the suits who are literally in charge of how much things cost aren't in charge of how much things cost. I get it, stuff everywhere in general is more expensive than it used to be, but if you look at why that is, guess what class of dickhead is to blame? Game developers cite bad management as one of the most common contributing factors to the difficulty of game development. We've all heard far too many stories about video game management swanning in, imposing unreasonable deadlines, stressing devs out, ordering that months or sometimes even years of work be scrapped to chase a trend, and no matter how expensive it is to make a game under perfect conditions, the ineptitude of corporate oversight piles more expense on top. More to the point, has anybody interviewing these wretched pustules asked them why games are considered too expensive to make, but executives aren't considered too expensive to pay? Oh, you better believe I'm still banging that drum. It's a crucial point that's never addressed, and until it is, I'll work my drumstick to a red raw nub. You see what I mean though, right? Of course executives don't want us to start thinking about who's actually responsible for things, because then uncomfortable questions like how much are you being paid? Why are you paid that much? And what is it that you bipedal foreskins actually do all day start cropping up? The amount of stories we've had to cover about management making a game's development hellish and more expensive is staggering, and yet it's management that pays itself millions of dollars after giving the lion's share of the profits to investors, ensuring that most of the money a game makes doesn't get used to help alleviate the expense of making games. Yeah, games are expensive to make, but the industry first should deal with far bigger and far less necessary costs. And this is why I call the mass layoffs an indulgence too, because why can't the millionaires in leadership positions take a few less of those $1 million bonuses they award themselves on top of their disparate base pay? It's because it ain't about can't, they won't. This lack of accountability manifests in the way the audience is blamed for things or cited as a reason for a publisher doing what it was gonna do anyway. We see this in the classic X genre is dead routine, where some corpo twerp claims nobody wants a certain type of game to justify throwing the baby out of the bathwater to dogpile onto whatever type of game's trendy in the moment, to the exclusion of everything else, because that's what makes a healthy industry. It's hardly surprising that Warner Brothers decided to pivot so fucking hard to freemium horse garbage directly after Suicide Squad's shooter justice team flopped. After years of publishers exhausting us with tepid looter-shooter games, themselves an offshoot of the exhausting live service gold rush, WB had one failed attempt and it was baby throwing time. Because publishers are as a horde of locusts, stripping a field bare of crops and blaming their subsequent hunger on the emptiness of crop fields. Warner Brothers couldn't have been more self-demonstrating when it contributed to the saturation of a market and then ran away to contribute to the saturation of a market. Self-demonstrating but far from self-aware. One thing game publishers pretend not to be aware of is the impact caused by my most beaten drum, aggressive predatory video game monetization. Microtransactions and other forms of monetization take advantage of neurodivergent people, of those struggling with mental health. And while game publishers would have you believe that the so-called whales spending thousands of dollars on microtransactions microtransactions are a handful of incredibly wealthy people, the reality is they're not. I've done actual journalism on this. I've spoken to people with problem spending issues, with problem gambling issues. I've heard fucking heartbreaking stories of how people's lives were negatively impacted by games, or how they were using games to cope with their struggles until loot boxes arrived in their favourite ones and forced them to quit for their own fucking good. Because of the way microtransactions are designed, small incremental purchases, they've been able to swindle thousands of dollars out of people without them even noticing, and to this very day, not a single video game publisher has ever so much as acknowledged what's going on. They don't just sweep it under the rug, they pretend there's nothing to sweep. And to this very day, they still repeat patronising propaganda like, it's optional, or only a small number of players spend the money, as if it's actually good that their monetization is designed to isolate a small group of people and pump as much money out of them as they can. You know, like actual financial abusers do. And the entitled way that they fought loot box regulation because they wanted all the revenue of gambling mechanics without the responsibility of gambling mechanics. Those court battles rendered into sharp relief just how allergic to accountability these fucking corpos are. They don't want to pay for the things they've done, they don't want to face the things they've done, and they're simply allowed to do it. They're allowed to behave like the consequences of their actions don't exist. Absolute fucking cunt.
Cog, I'm the one who made the bet, and I know we'll be exactly right on time.
As I write this, Call of Duty players are currently lamenting the appalling state of the game's Battle Pass bullshit. Battle Passes being another trend that publishers stuck their dicks into en masse and fucked bone dry. Anyway, Activision Blizzard's been criticised for selling Battle Passes between Battle Passes, after announcing a Squid Game-themed event for its latest predatory shooter, and locked all the decent rewards behind an impromptu premium pass that has indeed been slotted in between the scheduled ones. So basically, they're making their players pay for marketing. That's fucked up. And that's just a random fucked up thing that happened in the last week. Far from the worst thing that's ever happened, far from the worst thing that ever will happen, the game industry is fucked up is the point I'm making. It is completely screwed because it's helmed by people who think this shit is okay. The wanton, unrepentant, exploitative profiteering has no end for the little monsters running the game industry into the ground. I cannot emphasize enough what I said earlier. These people are unhinged. Investors have a lust for money so extreme it's irrational, and publishers promise such a contradiction of reality that if a friend of yours in real life suggested a similar infinite money plan, you'd ask them if they were feeling okay. Of course the industry is in free fall, of course the market is volatile, and of course publishers want you to believe that's just a case of shit happens because they don't want it acknowledged that what they've done to the medium of video games is outright fucking depraved. Also, they're stupid. Oh yes, it's my favourite part of my episodes about game executives. It's the game executives are dumbasses part. This is the point I've really wanted to hammer home every time I've talked about the overpriced and underhanded ring slurpers who backstabbed and glad-handed their way into positions of power. Nothing I've seen in my near 20 years of video game coverage has convinced me that video game leadership is much smarter than a show. They push markets to unsustainable levels. They repeat the same mistakes we've seen them repeat time and time again. They routinely showcase a lack of understanding of how games are made or why they're played, and they seem genuinely surprised when they never change their tactics and end up with unchanged results. They coast by on the assumption that rich, successful people must be smart because why wouldn't they be, when their actions, attitudes, and the intellectual slop that cascades out of their all-too-open mouths demonstrates that being a greedy ball of tacky putridity may take a certain predatory cunning at most, but absolutely doesn't require an ability to learn from one's mistakes, understand context of any type, or realise that if every single game is doing the exact same thing, most of them won't fucking sell. And please don't take this as me sneering at anybody I perceive as not smart or uneducated. I'm sneering at executives who have a track record of being world-class dummies despite many of them having rather fancy and high-priced educations. I've never considered myself particularly smart, and I have almost no formal education at all. I'm just infinitely superior to a video game executive, and so are you. And if you have any pets or children in your home, so are they. Said pets and children, it has to be said, are also much more capable of restraint. Boy oh boy, it's cathartic to unprofessionally insult these meat toilets in as offensive a manner as possible. I just really enjoy disparaging the executive class, if you couldn't tell by some of last year's more vicious shows. And it isn't even a politics thing. Valid as it may be to scrutinise their nonsense from an anti-capitalist perspective, I've personally watched the so-called leadership of the game industry spend the last 10 plus years dismantling everything the medium was and could have been. And as we've just seen, now the so-called AAA space has been strip-mined and ravaged. They're looking to up sticks and move on to more exploitable pastures, fleeing from the mess they created while never once owning up to its creation. That is why I revel in going out of my way to offend these short-sighted, infantile tools. Because I love video games, and the world of video games isn't ruined. No, it's not ruined. It's been ruined by them. The problem with eating an apple is you are now on a timer, because that shit is gonna start getting brown. So I don't have an outro, I didn't plan one. But the apple is turning. As soon as you bite into an apple, you've started the clock. It's browning as we speak. Thank God for me. I've got to eat the apple. I've got to eat the apple. It really is nice. There's no joke or anything. I just legitimately fucking love apples.